Righto, councillors. Following some discussion with the Chief Executive and staff, we wanted to find a way to make sure that that any risks around anything we might resolve were taken care of. So the suggestion is that in this case and in any following ones, because basically if we're voting funding, there has to be protections around it. And in this case, the suggestion is that it be subject to this grant.
Not all of these.
Well, so any that we come up with.
In this section of the meeting.
Be subject to conditions set by the Chief Executive, for instance, MOUs or whatever is worked out with the receiving organisation.
And
that
will
way,
be different.
council's protected. Because I take it that if we just voted 110,000, for instance, in this case, to an organisation and it went tits up the next day, there's the 110,000 out the door and no boating club. So we need... Yep. I'm happy to be anatomically corrected. Right. Right. So, in that light, could we have some words, please, Sandy, for this one? There we go. Right. So that it approves 110,000 to be contributed to support the Broad Bay Boating Club rebuild project, subject to any conditions as determined by the Chief Executive. And that would be the kind of thing, like an MOU, say, which they will all have to go through, or any of these would have to go through. Okay, we've got a mover and a seconder, and now can I re-invite you to speak to this, Councillor Wiley? Sorry for the delay.
Oh, no, that's perfect. Thank you. So when Marty Brash came in and the Broad Bay Boating Club came and presented to us, the total project is $960,000. I think when we look at what else is happening out on the peninsula with the Peninsula Safety Improvement Project and the multi-use of what that area is going to be, I think this is actually a good community and project to be involved with. The parts that sort of got me swayed with it is it's not a boating club as such. There's going to be a lot of other uses are going to be with it, and there's going to be already, as I've said, the multi-sport club is keen to be part of it, and it's going to be very much involved with, as I could see it, cycleways usage and things like that. So anyway, I'm fully supportive on that basis.
Thank you. Further speakers? Councillor Elder.
I thought we had question time. I just had a question actually, because we hadn't had that question time.
No. Well, let's do all the questions now. That's fine.
Okay.
Fire away. Yes.
So my question actually is about amenities on the peninsula already, and I note that McAndrew Bay has a toilet and a hall, and I don't know where the next toilet is along because there is one at Broad Bay, and so I struggle with this because of the amenity value that's already there, toilets, etc. So if I'm biking out on the peninsula, and I get caught short, so to speak, I have got facilities available. So looking at all the requests we've got, which is many, and balancing it out, and knowing that the members of the club, there's 65.
So is this a question?
So, yeah, I was just wanting to know the amenity, how much amenity value is. So there's Broad Bay has a toilet, and so does
Okay,
McAndrew Bay.
So if you want to preserve your speaking
Yeah,
right.
sorry,
No, that's right.
Yeah.
But I'll do any more questions and then I'll come back to speaking. Councillor Van Der Vis, you had a question. Okay, we'll come back to you. Okay, are there any more questions?
Could I just understand how this report was written, and I may have it wrong? There's 2 lines under this report in the actual report. Is the second part that the DCC staff work with Broad Bay Boating Club to investigate options for DCC to support? And it's got an unspecified. Is that an additional submission, or was that what the response was?
No, that's part of the submission.
That
but
was part of the submission,
So
so-
that has a cost, but it's an
Yeah.
unspecified cost.
On top of.
This is a funding request report, but so
Yeah.
some were specific, some were unspecified.
Yeah, no, so I had misunderstood that in a couple of instances. That was a response. Sorry, thank you.
So in a sense, Sandy, what you're saying is that this incorporates, to some extent, the second.
No, there were 2 requests. One was for $110,000, and there was a second request that staff work
Yeah.
to investigate ways for the DCC to also further support the club.
Okay, thank you. Could
Which
Which
is
has
an
a cost,
alternative.
it will be unspecified.
The
Righto.
subsequent, the other question I had was, I appreciate that this was in this year. I didn't actually, are we convinced that the money is needed in the next financial year? Because I would feel it much more comfortable to consider the whole project in the long-term plan. In the next, well, I won't be here, but the next long-term plan, and whether it should be or split between 2 years.
Well, won't that be part of the conditions?
Well, it does have an effect on our decisions today, that's all, Your Worship.
Well, I don't think we can predetermine that anyway.
If I may, Your Worship, as the resolution is written, that money is for the 1920 year.
And if it's not needed,
Well, I don't know. If I can, we have no further information,
Okay.
as I understand it, than that which was presented. Is that right, Rob?
Well, I do know that the way it was presented as a 3-phase project over a number of years, and they were requesting 110,000 as part of phase 1. But what their timeline is for phase 1, I can't comment.
yeah, okay.
Okay. Any further questions? All right. Can I invite Councillor Van Der Vis as the first speaker?
Much as I appreciate that these community groups do a lot of good and that you can hold weddings and do all sorts of things sometimes in some of their facilities, they are essentially private clubs. People in them, a bit like the Taieri Airport Club, pretty well heeled. And in terms of area, and I come back to the decision we made over St Clair yesterday, in terms of area, the peninsula has had an extraordinary amount of money spent on it, extraordinary amount of public money spent on it, for which there's been no targeted rating, and to which all of their properties, I think, are going to receive significant increased value. So, given that there are other boating clubs around in much less privileged areas, given also that they obviously have the resources to build themselves a new $1 million boating club, it would be nice to encourage them. I think under the unspecified that perhaps staff could spend a bit of time to help them through their consent processes. But in terms of giving these particular applicants $110,000 of ratepayers funding, I find it a little difficult to justify. I hope to hear from other councillors, perhaps there are some other valid arguments for it. I'll listen with interest.
Further speakers? Councillor Elder.
I kind of have to concur with Lee on this one. I was concerned about toilets and amenities on the peninsula because I think it will be a world-class cycleway. But knowing that there's toilets and facilities at Broad Bay and at McAndrew Bay, I struggle to, but given the amount of money that has been spent on the peninsula, and I'm really happy with that. I mean, there's been an upgrade that will be of worldwide significance, I think, but I cannot support this.
Further speakers? Councillor Laufiso.
Your Worship. For me, I'm not sure if there were actually young people that came to the submission, but I'm aware of one of the strengths of that program is that they have taken young students, young boys and girls, teenagers, who are perhaps not fitting in at school, and they're taking them and energising them and training them and offering them skills, life skills, and actually tautoko. And so when I think about the young people all over the city, no matter whether they're well-heeled or not, we, apart from the climate injustice or the struggle that we're leaving to them, also part of our legacy, if you like, is neoliberal economics, which they have never known another world where there was actually a society that cared about all generations of people. And I think it was criminal, and I think that that the government of the day should or people who benefited from that whole system, Rogernomics and Euthanasia, should be tried for treason, because they have condemned our children to student loans and neoliberal economics, which will take generations from us for us to recover from. So, 110,000, 500,000, whatever. I think it's just, again, it's leadership, it's investment in our children, no matter where they live in the city, and we have to actually model and care for them. And wherever there is a group of adults and whanaunga, the elders, taking care of them, then I'm all for it.
Councillor Steadman.
Thank you, Worship. I concur with Councillor Lafiso. I'm involved in a similar type club, except we don't use wind to propel us. We use oars and stuff. We've got kids and stuff involved in our club, and it's a struggle getting them there. We set the tone, the core values of life. Their cell phones aren't allowed to be around them when they're in the club, and I'm sure we've got to provide a bit of leadership here and get these kids actually into these environments. We're saying to the community, yes, we're behind you 100% on what you're doing in your small community, so we've got to support them. As Councillor Fiso said, we've got to be showing some leadership here. It's a small amount to pay to get people involved in these clubs and enjoying the clubs and actually interacting with each other in a healthy manner, not over a screen or anything like that. So I'm fully supportive of this sort of stuff. It's a small amount to pay at the end of the day. Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
I think we're heading into an area of setting a precedence, and we need to consider that as we go forward. Basically, we will, if we give this, it will be perfectly reasonable for any other publicly minded group to say, well, you've set a precedence that you can give this kind of money. Now, it may be that that's where we need to go. These are providing public services to the communities. It's not a private organisation. It is one that has a membership, but I think there's always a difference between a sporting organisation that has membership and let's say a country club, which is exclusive. They did mention, and I'm glad that Councillor Fesa reminded me of it, that they do have this outreach program. So they are providing into their community. So that's something I think that should be acknowledged in this request. I am going to vote for it, but I think we might be opening up a Pandora's box at the same time, because I think we're going to be basically committing ourselves to this request now from lots of places. So if we give it, I would like it to be considered in the context of what it costs them as they interface with us, such as the consents and other such things, because it might be that if we're trying to evolve a policy on the fly as we go when we do this kind of thing. We shouldn't have anything like this organisation have to necessarily bear some of the costs that a normal construction cost would have, because they have a community good component to them. So I would be interested when it was all over to see how much their fees that they did generate from us cost them, and how much this came towards recouping those fees costs.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Just to comment on that last point, I'm not sure there's a great deal of difference between a community group like this and a building project and the money that we've committed in recent times to a hockey turf at King's High School, which other people will use, of course, because it's a community asset, to a new all-weather turf for football at Logan Park and so on. I think the precedent is well and truly established that we help groups of whatever kind according to their application. And I think it's a bit unfortunate for another previous speaker to allow his prejudices about the Otago Era Club to be transferred to a community group that has quite a different composition from what he thinks the composition of those people who fly aircraft are. Those of us who were fortunate enough to be at the launch ceremony for this excellent project will know the composition of the community and the links long established with the local school. And I see a double advantage in that, not only in terms of the community development in the area, but also making much better use of our harbour. And when we talk about the money that's been spent on the peninsula, well, overall, isn't it long since overdue? And the money spent on the harbour has generally been a much underused resource, despite its magnificence, because a lot of these clubs have been struggling for a long time. So I think what they're doing with their youth sailing project and the development of a facility for community use beyond just the club is a good initiative, and it deserves support.
Councillor Wilson.
I think this project is absolutely fantastic. I think it's a neat community facility. I think there's a whole lot of things that are good for it. I just don't like the process, I'm sorry. We haven't had a staff report on it. It's come in outside of a time frame or a reporting or priority ordering. And I find that really frustrating. I'm not taking away from them. I personally will, so Your Worship, I would like to foreshadow, should this not pass an alternative or motion, which would be that DCC staff work with the Broad Bay Boating Club to investigate options for the DCC to support the Broad Bay Boating Club rebuild project and report back in the next annual plan. And then there is time to do that process, which I think is actually really critical that we do it properly, considering that this is only stage 1 to rebuild the foundations and platform, and if stage 2 and stage 3 aren't right, we may end up with a part-built thing. So that's where I'm coming from. It's not a criticism of the project, and I know that they have built this around our application time, but it just doesn't seem to be the right process for me.
I think you've already spoken, have you? Yes, you have. Right. Look, I draw on the same. I'm very supportive of the project. I just think we've got this round the wrong way. I think I support Councillor Wilson's indication that she'll, in the event that this fails, she'll present a subsequent motion. I think that if the staff work with the boating club, they can go through the needs. I don't think, and then report back, and then we've got a clearer idea of how we can help them and why we might help them. I also think that timing is probably not too critical. If there are 3 stages and the total is about $1 million, then if the stages are roughly the same, this is about 1/3 of the first stage. Now, if they haven't got enough to get the first stage off the ground reasonably, they're not going to get very far anyway. So I don't think there's any harm in us doing an investigation, as the second para there suggests, and coming back, and then we can go back, and it may be that they need more than 110 ultimately, but we'll have a much clearer idea of why we would be giving it and what we would be applying it to. So I can't support this in its current form, but I'd certainly support the subsequent motion which could lead to this at a later date. Are there any other speakers? Okay, Councillor Wiley, you're right to reply.
Your Worship, can I just get clarification from Mr West over an answer he gave?
Sure.
Just checking the other public toilet in Broad Bay is located where?
Adjacent to the current boat shed.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to get clarification that it was next to the boat shed. There wasn't one other that I couldn't locate in my mind. Okay, thank you. I'm still very much in support of this motion going through. It's to help them get underway, assist them with funding and showing leadership. But to me, it's more important about actually, with us putting some skin in the game, we're actually giving them confidence and the other funders that will come to the table that we are part of this project and we're engaged with it. And I think that's important for anybody that's looking at a project of this size. So I do wish you to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to put this, and I think we'll do it by division, and then it's clear, because it's clear that the table is not of a single mind.
Councillor Benson Pope. Councillor Elder. Councillor Councillor Hall.
Yes.
Councillor Hawkins.
No.
Councillor Fiso.
Yep.
Councillor Lord.
No.
Councillor Vandervis.
No.
Councillor Newell.
No.
Councillor O'Malley.
No.
Councillor Steadman.
Aye.
Councillor Wiley.
Yes.
Councillor Wilson.
No.
Oops. Councillor Cull.
I think that's a little premature.
Mick
No. I know it was meant with love.
Motion is lost 8-5.
Councillor Wilson, I invite you to put the subsequent motion.
It's the second paragraph basically with the year for next year, if that makes sense in the report. So the DCC staff work with the Broad Bay Boating Club to investigate options for the DCC to support the Broad Bay Boating Club rebuild project and report back for the 2020-21 annual plan.
And I'll second it from the chair.
Thank you.
So, do you wish to speak any further to it?
No.
Your Worship, I'll move that the motion be put.
Okay. I'll,
24 2B.
I'm afraid I have to take that procedural motion first without debate. So this is the procedural motion. Now, only a procedural motion, there's no debate, but to be clear what the motion is, that the vote be put. This is not the vote. This is a motion that the vote be put. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Then we'll put the vote. All those in favour of the subsequent motion moved by Councillor Wilson, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried. Thank you. Okay.
Well done.
Now we moved on. Next one. Can we just go through the list, please? Order. Hang on. Order. Now, can we just move down the list? And I'm not going to go through all of these, so if just go through the list, they're all there from page 76, 77, and on to 78. So we'll go down. If you've got one that you're interested in, please, as we go down. Councillor Benson Pope.
Middle of page 77, the Archibald Baxter Memorial Trust.
Yes, you'd like to move something?
I've got a motion in someone's hands.
So,
Thank you. I think this is a modest contribution to an admirable project. Councillors will recall the runaround that this trust has had, and which they didn't dwell on in their submission, but you'll recall the original site for this commemoration for one of our most famous sons, and a local. was originally touted for the green area in Anzac Avenue immediately north of the railway station, largely because of objections from the Returned and Services Association, because you couldn't, on the argument, you couldn't commemorate Conchies on a road called Anzac Avenue, which I think is a complete non sequitur. However, they then examined the possibility of a site in the museum reserve, which unfortunately the museum thinks belongs to it, which led to them working with staff for a considerable amount of time to establish an agreed site, namely the steps at the head of Albany Street, which is all agreed and designed. The reason one other step. I thought I might be able to save council the pain of having to have this discussion by directing them to the Heritage Fund, but at the meeting of the Heritage Fund where their request for some support was presented, we decided unanimously it would be stretching the terms of reference rather too much to apportion any funding, even though we were in funds. And so we're back here, and I'm presenting to you what I think is a painless way of giving some acknowledgement of the value of this project, which has been extensively worked on very objectively and openly for some years, and is very strongly supported by the patron of the Trust, none other than the former Attorney General, Mr Finlayson, to get this off the ground. So they have got funding in place already. They predictably have other applications in hand, and which is why I've included the qualification on the sum, because if they get it all, we might not need to give them quite so much. But it seems to me that because we have existing budgets which are in funds, it might be a really good way of tapping those to help them on the way. And I plea for your support.
Okay.
Sorry?
So this one has no rating impact because it'll come out of an existing budget
it's
line.
existing
But
budget.
it's a pre-decision about the spend of that budget line.
Well, I just think we need to respond to their submission. I think this is a good way of meeting everyone's needs.
Okay, so as with the previous one, I'm going to open it up for questions alone first and then speaking. So you've got a question? Yep. Oh, it's been seconded already. Thank you. Right, okay, I'll put you top of the list. But I just want to canvass any questions, and I was going to ask that question. Just to emphasise that this has no rating impact because it's an existing fund. It's just allocating money from the fund. Any other questions? There being none, Councillor Vandevers, you're right, speaking. Right.
We don't really have a memorial to those that were conscientious objectors both the First and Second World Wars. I believe that those conscientious objectors are worthy of a memorial. I'm not absolutely convinced that this is the ideal site for them, like Councillor Benson Pope. I think that Anzac Avenue actually would have been better. It was bigger, had more space. It would have presented a balanced view of those terrible conflicts that we had. For anybody interested, the book All Quiet on the Western Front is one of the most staggeringly insightful damnations of trench warfare you could ever hope for. You may be disappointed to hear that it's only because people were such bad shots that I'm here, because my grandfather was a conscientious objector in the First World War and was peeling potatoes on top of the trenches with bullets flying all around them for a good part of it, which is how they treated conscientious objectors in those days. Extraordinarily strong people that put their lives on the line for their beliefs that war was simply an unacceptable way for people to behave. I think that this kind of memorial is something that we can support. I'm glad that it's a modest amount that we're supporting it with. I'm glad that there is other funding for it, and I look forward to everybody supporting this. Thank you.
Further speakers? Councillor O'Malley.
I think I'd go even further to say that Archibald Baxter is probably one of the most memorable characters that the city's ever produced. And if you get, after you've read All Quiet on the Western Front, you should obviously read We Will Not Cease. That shows in that book the immense bravery it takes to stand up to the common rush to the gun, which is what everybody else was doing. And there were many a name on the memorial that we stand outside on Anzac Day who played, as Dennis Glover called, their unwished-for part, who were too afraid probably to say that they didn't want to go and ended up dying in the fields of France anyway. So I believe that he's one of the bravest, strongest characters the city's ever produced, and it is genuinely a shame on us that this isn't really in a more prominent place, but I'm glad it's going up where it is, because I really don't want Wellington to beat us.
Further speakers? Okay, there are none. I will be supporting this, and I'd just point out, although while I agree that Anzac Avenue would have been a better spot, and I agree that the resistance to it came from the Return Service Association, I also understand that the ground underneath is riddled with infrastructure that can't easily be built over in any case. So, although that may have been spurious excuse in the first place, but that's the way it's fallen, and that's where we've ended up. So, Councillor Benson-Pope, you're right to reply.
That last constraint is also true of the site that has been approved, but that has been fixed. That has been fixed by lining the pipes. So, in fact, in reality, we've already made an initial contribution. But I think I'm looking forward to seeing this happening. It's certainly going to be an interesting feature at the end of our new bit of Albany Street as the centre city stuff happens, and a lot of our locals and visitors attending the university will see it as well. The message around it, the sculpture, I think, is appropriately discreet. It doesn't figure people being tortured on gibbets, as was one of the original proposals, but is elegant and is also, as you'll recall, a replication of the trenches themselves, so with appropriate interpretation information. So I thank colleagues for the messages of support. If anyone doesn't have access to or wants to read the Baxter book, I have 2 copies of it available since I've tidied up my study. And I'm happy to bring them for you to look at. It's the most extraordinary tale of human unkindness to men who were tortured for their beliefs both here in prison in Wellington and then shipped to the front to be frozen and hung out in the snow.
Okay, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. If we could continue down the list, and anyone else want to put that? Councillor Newell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to support the proposal from Sport Otago regarding the possibility of some sort of rates, rebate or relief. Right.
Now, is it seconded? So that's so again. I'm going to wait. I'll wait till I've cleared questions, and then I'll invite you to speak to it.
Certainly.
So, are there any questions of this? And or what I will ask for a start is that you be a little more specific, because the request is.
It's for a property arrangement grant to the tune of $57,000.
And that's what you're.
Yes.
Sorry. So it is to provide a grant of $57,000, subject again to conditions set by the CEO.
Yes.
Okay. Right. Questions, councillors? Yeah. Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you. Question for staff. I should take advice. Although I feel. Can you remind me? It's a process question. Can you remind me how the property lease arrangements go? Is it a contestable fund? Okay, so I don't feel conflicted as a recipient wearing another hat. That's fine. But so is 57,000 the current value of the lease that they have? Right. So because my next question was, my understanding is that people apply for a percentage of their lease or rent or rates, to be deducted. And is that 57,000 is a figure that they've come up with? But do we have any sense of how analogous that is to other similar arrangement grants? So I'm just trying to get a sense of scale. Sorry. Okay.
I think I can answer that. Basically, they've had a relatively large increase, and the grant of 57,000 will put them in line with a similar arrangement in Invercargill and Canterbury.
Oh, sorry, no. That's helpful to know. My question was more around how it fits with, because we obviously have a framework for making these decisions with all of our buildings. I'm just trying to get a sense of, as a percentage or however it's worked out, how this request aligns with what we ordinarily do, and subsequent to that, because I don't imagine that's something you can answer immediately, how does it normally work? I guess my question is, why is it coming through this mechanism as opposed to the mechanism that we already have for assessing these things against other applications? Sorry, that's not why it's here. Isn't for staff to decide, but what is the process generally for making these decisions?
So Joy's not here to answer that, but I understand.
Can you use your microphone?
How unusual. As I understand it, there are mostly existing ones in the budget that have been identified historically. But I will have to check with Joy about what the process is for a new organisation accessing that fund, because I don't think anyone else here can probably answer that with any degree of detail. But I can get her over.
Yeah, I'm not unsympathetic to the request. I'm just trying to get a sense of how it works.
Yeah, and truly my level of understanding is probably not at the detailed level.
Okay, thanks.
So can I just... Councillor Hawkins has assumed that there is a consistent process by which these are sorted, and I'm not sure that that's correct, because they will have all been done at different times and probably on an ad hoc basis. So if you take, for instance, the Art Society and the railway station, my understanding is their rental costs are completely covered. Now, I may be wrong in that, and I stand to be corrected, but I'm not sure what we need to be comparing it with. So while staff are working out an answer for that question...
It's on the website. So there is, if you go and have a look, I won't read it out to you, but there's a section on property arrangement grants on the council website which talks to the process around lists the criteria, of which there are 7, and then new applications go via the grant subcommittee.
Right. Further questions? You have one, Councillor Elder.
We have a sort of did something similar to community gardens on parks and reserve land, in creating a lesser rate for them because of community good, and I sort of see this kind of as parallel.
Well, that's probably one of the criteria that's just been
community
mentioned.
Good.
Well, I don't know, but Ms Graham has just said that the criteria is listed on the website for that. Right, okay. Any further questions? Right. Councillor Newell, can I now invite you to speak to your resolution?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Basically, I've been involved with a number of aspects of Sport Otago over many, many years, right from being sort of an athlete in me prime to actually now having... Hey? What? Be nice to me.
When will it show?
It has, it's passed. And obviously now with little people myself, and I'm aware of the wonderful work that Sport Otago do, and the enormous amount of people in our community that they actually represent and interact with. This isn't, I think, outside of the norm, and as I say, it's not asking for the moon. It's basically just putting them in line with other organisations of a similar nature up and down the country. So I appreciate the work that Sport Otago do, and I think this is just going to help in some small way. So I would ask for your support. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And like I say, I'm entirely sympathetic to the intention of this and supportive of the work that they do in the community. But by way of background, I suppose this process, the annual plan process and the long-term plan process, traditionally was a parade of people turning up requesting civic grants for all manner of things. And there was a decision made by this body to assess those in a process outside of the budget setting process. So we have a grants subcommittee for that purpose that deals with civic grants and civic project grants, city service grants and city project grants, and also property grants of this nature to support exactly the kind of work that Councillor Newell has outlined. So while I'm supportive of where this would get to, without prejudicing any subsequent decisions the grants subcommittee might make, I think it would be more appropriate for this to go through the process that is advertised on Council's website as to how people go about applying for this very particular grant. And I don't think that's an onerous expectation on Sport Otago to do that, and I would welcome their application to be assessed when that comes due this year.
All right. Further speakers? Councillor Wiley.
A question to Councillor Hawkins or to Mr Bainbridge. Is there a limit? Sorry, I can see there's not a lot of...
Well, that's probably because we've got through questions.
Is there a limit on how much any one applicant can apply to the property department for a grant?
Who knows the answer to that?
No, there's not.
There's no limit.
Okay, well, I'll
yeah, speak to
in that case, I'm very much supportive of seconding this. Hence, I'd already forwarded a motion prior to Mr. Councillor Newell putting this forward, and I personally would like to see this actually taken care of here, so Sport Otago have full confidence that it's been dealt with, and they're in a better position to serve the community, because the outreach that they do and the benefits they do are quite dramatic. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Elder.
Does anyone know the amount of people that Sport Otago support every week through their 4 fields and through all their facilities? I would imagine it would be in the tens of thousands, both from preschool little nippers, rugby teams, through to adults playing sevens, or what they provide is a huge benefit to the health and well-being of our city, to social cohesion in the sense that teams create reduced social isolation. I could go on. The benefits of sport and being involved in teams and being outdoors is immeasurable, and so for me it's easy to support this because I think it fits our wellbeing strategy. It also, we can't underestimate like the Masters Games and all the sports that come here. We've got some of the best facilities in the South Island for sporting contests, and we're getting a lot. We make millions upon millions from sporting teams coming here, and so I think the benefits far outweigh the costs in this case, and I fully support it.
Councillor Benson Pope.
Well, Mr Chairman, I don't think this is about whether you support the request or not. I think it's inappropriate if we've got a process for dealing with requests of this kind, that's where it should go. So I think we should refer it to the Grants Committee for consideration. And that means it's considered on the same basis as other grants, rather than getting a particular different treatment here. And I'm sure the outcome will be the same. I just can't support, much in all as I support the request for support in principle. I think it makes a nonsense of a process that we have, that Ms Graham has indicated to us on our website. We deal with a one-off in a different way. I don't think that's at all appropriate or consistent. So I'll move that. I don't know whether you accept it.
Subsequent motion you're indicating.
I'll give indication and I'll do that. Good. When it fails.
Councillor Laufiso.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just beg my colleagues' indulgence in referring to the previous debate about the boating club, and I defer to the wisdom and experience of Councillor Wilson, who actually talked about precedents and process. So I think Councillor Hawkins and Councillor Benson both said the same thing. It's not that they're anti-sport. I did express to Mr Brimble, I think, at the time, that I was appalled at the level of sporting comparatively, the level of funding that sporting receives when I think about the social needs of our city. But however, I just endorse that this would go through the process that we already have in place. Thank you.
Well, I am of a mind to support the subsequent motion. I actually think that, I suspect that if this lease arrangement were looked at on the same basis as some other groups, they may get a damn sight more than 57,000 actually, and they may deserve it. So as I mentioned, there are, as I understand it, buildings for societies in the city that are owned by the council for which they pay no rent. And I think that given the splendid work that Sport Otago does, they should be looking at perhaps much higher support than they currently get. They're only going to get that through the process that is there. So I won't support this, but I'm very supportive of them going through the process and going for as much as they deserve. So I'm going to come back to, if there's no other speakers, Councillor Newell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I plead ignorance and I wasn't aware of the rates relief or grants process. I'm happy happy to move, to go to the subsequent motion. Well, I don't know what we do. If you want to vote it down, it's all good. But
well,
yeah, all right. Well,
no, I think it's probably
easier to vote it down.
Process-wise, it's
right.
easier to go through the vote, vote
good.
on it, and then we'll go to the subsequent motion. Should your
I do think they're great, though.
Should be, and you're fully entitled to vote against your own motion. There's no don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. All right. I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Aye. It's lost. Councillor Benson Pope.
I move that this be referred to the Grants Committee for consideration.
Okay. I'll second. Councillor Vandervis seconds. I don't think there's need for much more discussion, so I'm going to put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? I think it's unanimous, but we'll call it a carried anyway. Right. Carrying on down through the list. Is there anyone else want? Councillor O'Malley.
One Coast. It's not a request for money. It's just if Jenny can put up what I've written, we might be able to put the correct words in front of it. Effectively, while that's coming up, the transfer state, well, the Waikawari landfill has been due for capping for a couple of years, and it's moved off the works program twice, and it's moved into the next program. And I just want to basically, I don't know if we can instruct staff, but I want that staff will proceed with the capping of the landfill and the development of the transfer station, including earthworks to support proposed community activities with delivery in the 2019-20 year, which is what is in the plan, but I want it captured specifically so that there is a clear sense that the council is supporting this activity to be delivered in that year.
Okay. So is there...
All my staff are nodding enthusiastically.
Yes, good, I'm sure they will.
So just to be clear, Chief, is there a need for a resolution to do this, or staff?
No, let's just put it as a resolution, and then it goes into the resolution tracking system that you will shortly see.
Excellent.
So I need a seconder.
Seconder, please.
Second, Councillor Hawkins. Is there anything? Are there any questions of the mover before I invite him to conclude his remarks? There are none. Have you got anything else to say?
It's budgeted, so this isn't an issue in terms of finding any more money. It's just an imploration to staff to make sure it gets delivered.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers? There are none. I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried.
Your Worship,
Yep.
Dunedin Shanghai Association,
Yes.
if I could, I've sent a motion through to move increase from 3,500 to 8,500.
And I'll second that. So, are there any questions from anyone? Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just checking.
Yeah. So, if there are no further questions, can I invite you to speak to this, Councillor?
Just again, another one of those groups that actually go above and beyond, and just like we talked earlier about our engagement with Ngā Tahu, the contribution they make to the city, and often at their own cost. So, thank you.
Can I suggest that I note that they've asked for 10, and you've come up with a 3.5.
That was what was suggested, what the minutes actually say.
Oh, it's just that that's not what they asked for. But,
They asked for 5K. They've already. This is wrong. The papers are wrong.
Oh, they asked for 5?
That's for 5. They already get 5.
Yeah.
They asked for 10.
Yes,
10 in total.
that's for 10, and then she came back and she said, Ms Chan would like an increase of 3,500 annually, as that would provide 50% of the cost of the annual trip to China.
right. So if I could follow on from the mover and speak to this, the Dunedin Shanghai Association gets, as we know, 5,000 from council, and on more than one occasion they've contributed a good deal of that back to specific things within the city, whether it's funding a function for a visiting group in conjunction with council or other things. And then they find themselves funding their own travel almost 100%. So I think this is a very small acknowledgement of the considerable amount of contribution that they put into the relationship between Shanghai and Dunedin. So I would commend this to councillors. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Vandervis.
Don't want to appear mean. Actually, I don't mind appearing mean, let's be honest.
Some character.
But in terms of the rate paid funding to Shanghai, there's been more of it in my experience recently than all the rate paid funding we had to Otaru, and goodness knows how many other places that were sister cities or deemed to be somehow culturally sensitive, or we got education students coming from them or whatever. To me, I mean, I love Shanghai. I've been there, obviously, at my own expense. I think it's a great place to visit, but I can't see the benefit to ratepayers for all of these trips. There have been so many of them, and all the Shanghai Association doing good work and all the rest of it, I can't see subsidising any more trips actually having real value for Dunedin ratepayers.
Right.
So unless someone else comes up with something more convincing, I'm going to have to vote against.
Right. Well, I'm going to treat that as a question and answer it. It has concerned me for some time that the Shanghai-Dunedin relationship has been seen as being on a par with the other two active relationships which we have with Edinburgh and Otaru, when in fact there is a much greater demand on our resources to fund the various trips that need to go to Shanghai, when most of them are actually outside the sister relationship. Most of them are supporting businesses, the university, the polytech, etc. in Shanghai. Now, they sprang out of the sister city relationship, but there's no way that they can be funded from the minuscule amount that is allowed for the Shanghai-Dunedin sister city relationship. And the payback, and I understand from Mr. Christie that in the not too distant future we're going to get a report. The payback to the city is in the millions of dollars. With the deals that are being made with high schools, with the universities, various other research institutions, there is research funding coming back now out of China and out of Shanghai specifically into Dunedin. Hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars of income being earned. So that's why I'm not rebutting what you're saying, I'm answering it. I'm pointing out that it has gone beyond just a simple sister city relationship that's between civic entities. A lot of this is genuine economic development and relationship building, and it shouldn't have to be paid for out of sister city funding.
I'll treat that as a question, Your Worship, and give my wife's experience at the university
Hang on. That wasn't a question, it was an answer to you. So I'm not having an argument. What I'm pointing out is you asked what the benefit to the ratepayers is, and what I'm pointing out is there are millions of dollars pouring into this city, one way or another, that have been started through the Dunedin-Shanghai sister city relationship. However, they have expanded well beyond that relationship now, and that's why they need other funding.
I was just going to add that my wife's experience working at the university, and she does a lot of this overseas hosting tours business, is that the Chinese millions are coming here anyway.
Well, they may do, but they're on the basis of MOUs and deals that are signed by our staff. So I think that's actually, I don't think you've got the right end of the stick there. If it weren't for the work that our staff are doing there, some of these wouldn't happen. That's factual. Right. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Gary.
Thank you, Your Worship. I thought I understood the relationship and the benefits to our city, but I didn't actually until I went up there to Shanghai. And you might laugh, Councillor Vandervis, but it's... Point of order, Your Worship. I found that disrespectful.
Yeah, well, I think that members around the table should be aware of the effect that their ad-libs, and this is all around the table, not confining it to Councillor Vandervis, that their comments are not well received and they're not helpful. So please restrain yourselves, one and all.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll continue. So I was up there for a tourism conference. We're in the China Year of Tourism, and our figures are growing of Chinese visitors coming to our city and spending money. That is a fact. It is a fact that our staff have been up there in China recently around the code application and made some particularly useful and profitable connections in China, also in our other sister city, Edinburgh, around code and progressing that, and it's gone in as a business case. I was at a presentation last night in which one of our staff presented about international students, and I know that our staff's visit to China recently and our sister city relationships were extremely important around reassuring education agents about students coming here and their safety for parents and for education agents. Our Chinese students are a very important part of our 5,000 international students in this city. And I don't have that figure at my fingertips just at the minute, but it's a very substantial amount of money. So over all of the different spheres, be it business, tourism, international students research, and our recent application to code, I know that there is huge benefits for our city. So I will be supporting this.
Further speakers? Councillor Laufisa.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not focused on the trade relationships or our sister city relationships so much as acknowledging the members of the Chinese community here in Dunedin. And if we know our history, we know that we were the settler governments and the settler communities were very racist towards Chinese immigrants, and the poll tax. The history is still with us. So I just want to acknowledge the struggles that Chinese immigrants and their ancestors went through, and I just want to acknowledge the fabulous contribution that Teresa Chan and all her her comrades or her community members make to the city. And I couldn't care less about China myself, but when it comes to acknowledging again Ms. Chan's work and her community and their graciousness again with which they work, and as ratepayers and citizens in this city, in this country, well, it's a no-brainer for me. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Short but brief. I think for the $3,500 we're talking about here, one less Le Gourmet request would make that saving, and I invite anyone around this room who thinks they need to do Le Gourmet requests to stop doing those, and then would worry about those costs rather than the value that this contribution will make.
Right. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Wiley, you're right in reply. Right. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? No. Carried. And I think that's an opportune time. We've been going for a couple of hours now. I think it's an opportune time. I'll move that we adjourn for a quarter of an hour. Seconded, Councillor Steadman. Very good. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And we'll be back here at 1:15.